Thank you very much for joining me in this video. You know, I appreciate the investment of time you make week after week to watch these videos, and I hope you find the material useful to you and helpful in your career. I want to talk to you today about a problem that cropped up, came across my desk. That's often the basis of what these videos are. I got a phone call from one of my agents the other day, and he had a situation on an agreement of purchase and sale that was in place and a deal that was about to close. He was representing the buyer, and he took the buyer through the property for a final inspection just a day or two before closing, and he discovered that there was some work that the seller had committed to do that he hadn't done. I think the specific one was to complete some electrical work, but it wasn't done. And in the agreement of purchase and sale, the seller had agreed to do it. And he said to me, "What position is my buyer in? What are his options?" Well, it depends on how the deal was structured. And I needed to look at the agreement of purchase and sale and find out whether it was a commitment that the seller made or it was a condition of the offer. In the one case, the agreement of purchase and sale would be firm and binding. In the other situation, the agreement would be conditional, and how the approach to the problem would be different from one to the other. In this particular case, it was firm because the seller had committed. It just said the seller agrees to complete the following work on or before closing. And we see this often. It can be complete renovations, finish a deck, open a pool, complete the electrical, all kinds of things where the seller says, I'm in the middle of doing this, we put the property on the market, but it's going to get done, and he makes that commitment, and maybe the agent representing the buyer puts it right in the agreement of purchase and sale that the seller agrees to do this work. Well, if the seller doesn't do the work, because you have a firm agreement of purchase and sale, that means the seller is in breach. And it also means the buyer's in the driver's seat and has some options. He can delay closing till the work's done. He can refuse to close, or he can have a holdback in terms of the purchase price. There's some things he can do. Now, obviously, you don't want to end up in court. Nobody wants to end up in court. It's just costly. But I would think if it did, a judge is going to award it on the side of the buyer because it's the seller who obviously didn't complete what he committed to do in the agreement of purchase and sale. But what may be the case is it may be a condition in the agreement of purchase and sale. It could say something like, well, let's suppose that, and we run across this from time to time, there's a garage full of junk. And the buyer wants to make sure that the junk's all removed before closing. And so he makes it a condition of the offer and says this offer is conditional on the seller removing all the items in the garage and leaving it clean and in a broom swept condition on or before closing. And then it goes on to say, failing which this offer becomes null and void and the purchaser's deposit returned to him in full without interest or penalty. And that's the way it's set up. But I want to tell you that there's some issues or problems with that clause, the way I quoted it, and I want to point out to you two or three of them. The first is timing. Often we'll say all the buyer cares about is that it's done before closing, and so it's conditional on being done on or before closing. The problem is that if it doesn't get done, you don't find out about it until closing, or the case with I've cited with the electrical a day or two before, but it became obvious that it wasn't going to be done on closing. By having that condition run right up until on or before closing, you don't have any lead time to explore your options. So that's the first problem. You need to have some free time. The second thing, and this isn't just here, but so often on agreements of purchase and sale that have conditions in there, it's not clear who signs the fulfillment of condition. This says that it's conditional on the seller completing work. Does that mean the seller signs the fulfillment of condition when he's done the work? We can't have that. He may not have done the work. It may not be done in a workmanlike fashion. So the clause needs to be modified so that the seller agrees to do such and such within a timely fashion, and it's a couple of weeks before closing, sometime that's reasonable, and found to the buyer's satisfaction. You need to put that in there so that it's clear that the buyer's the guy who's going to be signing off on the deal and making it firm and binding. And then there's a third thing, and that is I would really encourage you to put in a waiver condition or a waiver provision in your condition, saying that this condition is inserted for the benefit of the purchaser, may be waived at any time within the condition period at his sole option by notice in writing delivered to the seller. Why do I say that? Well, you know, as long as both parties do what they said they're going to do, everybody's euphoric about the deal, it probably doesn't matter. But let's suppose, take for example this year in Niagara where we've seen prices go up 10%. Let's suppose the seller decides he sold the property too cheap. He wants out of the deal. He wants to find somebody who's going to pay more. If it's structured without the waiver provision, he can just not do the work. He's not going to complete the deck. He's not going to do the electrical. He's not going to open the pool. Whatever he's agreed to do, he's not going to do. And because it's conditional on that, then it says failing which this offer becomes null and void. And so that means the deal dies and he's free to move on with whatever he wants. With a waiver provision, he can't do that. The buyer has the option of waiving and moving forward. Now understand, with the waiver provision, the work doesn't get done. But at least the buyer has the option of either moving forward or not moving forward, exercising the waiver or not exercising the waiver. And I want to tell you that, as I said before, as long as buyer and seller are both thrilled with the deal, no problem. But if there's some kind of a change of heart or change of mind on one of the parties, and they're looking for some kind of a technical issue in the agreement of purchase and sale so they can walk away from the deal, you don't want to be the one that created that technical problem. So you need to be very, very careful in structuring the deal and analyze some of these things. And it can certainly come up when there's further work to be done like we've discussed today. Watch very, very carefully how you word it. Be careful about pitfalls, and everybody's going to end up happy. Thank you very much for investing the time and watching this video. I'll talk to you again next week.